The foreign policy is influenced by its position as a leading nation and as a significant donor of humanitarian aid. That country is Australia. Australian foreign policy is guided largely by a commitment to multilateral, regional and strong bilateral relations with its allies. The key concerns of Australia in relating with other countries of the world, Nigeria inclusive, centers on free trade, economic, education, tourism, refugee, the economy, security, cooperation, and in the areas of culture and the likes. Just like Nigeria, Australia is an active member of the United Nations and the Commonwealth of Nations. My guest is the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria, His Excellency Paul Lemon. Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
Many, a great pleasure to be here.
Okay. Our focus on the program today is Nigeria-Australian relations. How many years, how well, how far? But with emphasis today on the Australian government educational policy in Nigeria. Nigeria has benefited robustly from that policy, and just recently, a contingent of Nigerians went off the shores of Nigeria to Australia for another batch of the program. You get to know more on Diplomatic Ties today. As I say, this and more, my name is Omini Oden. This and more on the program after this time out. Stay with us. So, how well, how far, Nigeria-Australian relations?
Oh, many thanks for the question. Australia and Nigeria, we go back a long way. In fact, we've had diplomatic representation here since 1960, and ever since then we've had very close people-to-people links, institutional links, economic links, but above all links at the political level in various international forums, as you mentioned, the United Nations, the Commonwealth of Nations, that are very extensive, more extensive than you might think. For two countries that are so geographically separate, there is a surprising amount of commonality of interest, commonality of values and aspirations. And there are many examples over the years of Australia and Nigeria working together on important issues.
Okay, let me talk about commonality in values. E.g.?
Well, for example, Nigerians demonstrated most recently in 2015 how much they value democracy. Of course, this is something that Australians hold very dear, and we joined with many other nations in expressing our delight at the success of the electoral process last year. So that's just to take one example. Human rights is another, where we are very vocal on the international scene and look to other countries like Nigeria who are also wanting to make sure that their citizens and the citizens of the region and the continent are able to share with those human rights. But also on the domain of trade and investment.
I'll get to that.
I will like to come back to that as well.
Okay. Okay, quickly. Somewhere in 2015, the Nigerian government and the Australian government went to MOUs, bilateral ties, and signed a couple of MOUs. I think a delegation led by the president of Nigeria went to Australia and did all that. So where are we with that now? Have we progressed after then?
I think you're referring to the CHOGM meeting, which was held in Australia in Perth. I think it was in 2011.
Yes, beyond that, there was another visit by Nigeria's president, the last regime.
That's right.
Yeah, and given the fact that governance is a continuum,
exactly.
We expect that if the MOUs are entered into, even after administration lapse, it outlives that administration.
That's right.
So we hope and believe by now the MOUs would have gone a step further from where it was. Where are we with it?
Well, the relations between our two countries continue to develop and go from strength to strength. And since those MOUs came into being, we've seen a number of important milestones, if you like, and some of the opportunities and potential that have been identified are starting to become reality. For example, in September this year, we had a visit by the Minister for Mines Mr. Fahmy, who came to Australia to talk to Australian mining companies about what more Australia and Nigeria could do to successfully and sustainably exploit the mineral resources of this country. So we've seen steps forward since that agreement was reached, but we're hoping to continue those steps to turn that into reality and to deepen those links, whether it be institutionally or people to people or in trade and investment.
Okay, you have this policy for Africa, an educational policy, which I know Nigeria has benefited, I use the word robustly, over the years. What informed that policy?
We in Australia have long supported programs which seek to develop the potential of the youth in our partner countries. So what we see it as fundamentally as an investment in the future of the country concerned, but also an investment in the future of the bilateral relationship between Australia and, in this case, Nigeria. So for us, it is a win-win, or we hope for both countries.
Not a win-lose.
Exactly. So everybody benefits. Nigeria benefits, Australia benefits, because we have Nigerians who have had exposure to Australia. They've had the benefit of what we think is some of the world's best educational opportunities, and they're able to bring back what they learn and apply that in their fields here in Nigeria. And so for us, we see it as a very tangible way that we can contribute to developing this country by developing its massive human potential.
Okay, so the educational program, I know recently, call it 2-3 months now, a contingent of Nigerians went off to Australia and there was a ceremony.
Yes.
I'm concerned about that policy. What informed it? How did it come about?
Well, it's part of the program that I mentioned. We call it the Australia Awards program. It's an Africa-wide program, but in Nigeria over the last 5 or 6 years there's been about 250 recipients, some of them short course awards, some of them fellowship awards, some of them at master's level, in a variety of fields, but focusing on public policy, agricultural productivity and development, mining, health and education. So some of those key areas where Australia has particular expertise, where we think that we can share that and that the individuals and Nigeria can benefit.
Within the profile of Australia, sets its diplomatic content or priority is centered. One of it is free trade. But we heard so much about free trade in Nigeria, and all we see is China. We don't see Australia. Is Australia available at all?
Very much so. Australia, a bit like Nigeria, is a trading nation. We trade in commodities. We're one of the world's largest exporters of mineral products, and so and agricultural products. So for us, trade and investment, which is free from barriers, is a benefit not just for Australia but for those trading partners. So we look to encourage other countries to adopt a similar approach, where there can be a win-win, as we've talked about, for both parties. We see that as the way to encourage investment and growth, and as a way to create ultimately jobs for our young people.
Why I asked this, maybe years before now, Nigeria was centered strictly, it was more or less a monocultural economy, oil.
Yes.
Now the emphasis is diversification, and one of the areas is solid minerals. You have talked about the fact that Nigeria's minister of solid minerals was in Australia recently. How well is Australia going to tap on this, given the fact that the priority is diversification to the agricultural sector, solid minerals, and other maybe real estate sector and what have you?
Look, I think Nigeria's potential for exploiting sustainably and profitably its mineral resources is now well known. In fact, during the Africa Down Under conference that was attended by Minister Fahmy, Nigeria featured quite prominently, including in the Australian financial press. Since then, we've had ongoing contact. In fact, next week we will have a delegation of Australian officials who will be visiting Abuja to conduct a workshop for mining officials from across Nigeria, from the States and from here in Abuja, on policy and management for this sector. So we see this certainly as one area where we can contribute to the industry here in Nigeria, to Nigeria's development, leveraging off some of our expertise in this particular.
Let's take on economic cooperation, other areas. Beyond the fact that you want to increase the trade volume between Nigeria and Australia, which area do you think Australia is doing well in the area? You have talked about the fact that it is win-win.
Yes.
And there's some kind of similarity between Australia and Nigeria. We are members of the United Nations. We are brothers in the Commonwealth of Nations, which means maybe you were colonized by the British.
Indeed, we have some similar colonial heritage in that sense. Australia is actually a federation like Nigeria. We are a collection of 6 former British colonies that federated in 1901. So we have some of the institutions you have in Nigeria. We have similar institutions with similar roots that go back that far. We have on the economic front, Australia, your viewers may be interested to know, is
tell them.
The 13th or 14th largest economy in the world now, even though we may be only the 60th largest country by population. So we have come a long way, and part of that is about encouraging open trade and investment, looking at how we can make our economy an export-focused economy, and looking at where we have strengths that we can leverage off. And one of those is in education. We talked about the scholarships earlier, but your viewers may also be interested to know that Australia is actually the country that attracts the 3rd highest number of international students anywhere in the world. So, including more recently a quadrupling of the number of Nigerian students who are choosing to attend university in Australia.
Outside the scholarship program?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So these are people who may choose to go to university in Europe or somewhere else in the world. They're now looking at further afield. We have world-class universities that attract, as I mentioned, the 3rd highest number of international students anywhere in the world. So we're looking at ways that we can make the most of that and share that excellent product as far and wide as we can.
Okay, when you were posted to Nigeria, what was your first impression?
Well, Nigeria was always a country that I was looking at the corner of my eye for many years before I was successful in being posted here. So it was a very deliberate choice, and for the reason that it's a country that fascinates me because of the trajectory that it's on, the fact that Nigeria has a big future no matter which way you look at it, even if it's just demographically. And so for me, as a diplomat, it is just vital. If you're going to understand geopolitics in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, you have to understand this region, you have to understand this continent, and you have to understand this country. So for me, it was a bit of a natural choice. As far as first impressions go, I've been struck by, first of all, the warmth of the Nigerian welcome.
Yeah.
When you first arrive, the first thing you hear is "you are welcome," and then the second thing you realise is that people really mean it.
Okay.
And then you hear it every day after you have arrived. So that's been terrific. I've been really impressed by the vibrancy of the media sector, for example. Nigerians love to have a say. They like to say often, say loudly, say it in newspapers, say it on TV, say it on radio. This is terrific. I wasn't aware of that, and it's something that I think really goes to the strength of democracy here in this country. So, those things have really impressed me, and in very positive ways.
Okay. My guest on Diplomatic Ties today is the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria, Paul Lemon. We're taking a look at Australian relations since it started far back in 1960, and recently the emphasis on the Australian education policy for Africa, and Nigeria has benefited much on it. We'll continue with other areas after this time out. Stay with us. You talked about the media, comparatively Australia, Nigeria, in terms of freedom of the media. What's your assessment?
Look, my impression is...
Is it gagged over there? Because Nigeria, it doesn't appear to be gagged.
I'm sorry, could you say that one again?
Is the media in Australia gagged compared to Nigeria?
Gagged.
If I gag you, it means...
Oh, gagged.
Like, yeah.
Sorry. No, the Australian media, like the Nigerian media, is very vibrant, very active, and very influential. I think what I've noticed here is that people have an enormous appetite for newspapers. The diversity, the number of newspapers here, and the fact you see people reading them everywhere you go is really impressive. Online here is also booming. Television, radio. It's quite an impressive characteristic that I hadn't quite appreciated.
So if you're asked the question, will you love the Australian government to invest in the media in Nigeria? Will you say yes?
I don't think it's for the Australian government per se.
It's robust and vibrant.
Well,
I'm trying to be transactional here.
Yes, I know. Look, I think the Australian government's position about foreign media is always to let the country concerned look after their own affairs in that regard. But we certainly admire and appreciate and congratulate countries like Nigeria who have managed to have such a successful media sector. With all its ups and downs, I mean, I don't think anyone would say that in any country we have perfect media that get it right every time. But that's all part of it.
Okay. Nigeria is a federation, same for Australia.
That's right.
Australia practices a federal structure. Yours and Nigeria, how does it look?
This is why...
Are they similar?
Yes. In fact, not many people may know, but back in 1960, Nigeria and Australia had almost, as far as I can tell, an identical political federal structure, right down to a House of Representatives and a Senate, states. I think you even had premiers for a while. Yes. And so coming here, it's very familiar. And some of the arguments that I hear about financial debates or discussions or disputes between state governments and the federal governments, this has come straight out of the Australian experience. We have the same thing.
Okay.
So, you know, federal systems are terrific because they can bring about sort of creative tension, if you like,
Okay.
where there's incentives for different parts of the country to do better. But it has to be managed carefully, and there are always traps that can be fallen into. So certainly for us, federation is just a core part of who we are, and I think that's the same here.
Okay. One thing common in this present government is that they are open to investors from outside Nigeria, and are you working towards this?
That's an attitude that we would very much support and applaud. Of course,
the government says they want to reflate the economy, and they say they are open to investors.
Yes.
And they want investors to come, establish, manufacture here, and export from Nigeria. So is Australia trying to tap out on that?
I think Australia.
But when you say Africa, it's not in dispute that Nigeria is number one. Is it true?
I think traditionally, mainly because of geography, southern and eastern Africa have often captured a lot of attention from Australia, perhaps just because of the sheer distance. But increasingly, with Nigeria's position as the dominant economy in this region and on the continent, increasingly Australian firms are looking further afield. And as modern technology develops and the tyranny of distance is defeated, I'm thinking that will increase the interest over time. Australian investors will be looking to make sure that their investments here can be safe and secure. They're used to taking risks. It's not about having a risk-free operating environment, but ensuring that things like their licenses and approvals and contracts and all those things stick together will be very important for investor confidence.
Okay, a couple of countries have been advocating a rejig of the United Nations Security Council, and Nigeria has that position too. And Nigeria is saying, yes, rejig it, give an African country a slot for the permanent seats on the Security Council, and above all, Nigeria says she has the capacity to serve in that Security Council. Will Australia support Nigeria?
I think I'd start my answer to that question by saying that aspirations to change some of those structures within the United Nations might remain aspirations for a while. I think that's a really tough nut to crack.
Okay.
But certainly we support Nigeria as an active member of those sorts of forums. And in fact, Nigeria and Australia served together on the UN Security Council recently as non-permanent members. But nonetheless, a reflection of your country and my country's strategic interests in that high-level body.
Okay, so if it's okay, we give it a nod for Africa to have a permanent seat. Will you root for Nigeria?
Maybe we'll do a reciprocal arrangement.
Okay, let's move on. A couple of months back, we had the challenge of insurgency in Nigeria. Will you say Nigerian government has tried so far, the lips covered?
Look, I think it's well recognised now that the Nigerian government has made great strides in pushing back some of the territorial coverage of the Boko Haram insurgency, which is a positive thing, but I think we are a long way from being out of the woods. Unfortunately, there are remnants that are still capable of causing great harm, above all to local populations who continue to suffer, including those people who have been displaced internally. So while we recognise that progress has been made, we do also realise that we can't say that our efforts can stop or that the government's efforts can stop. There's still more work to be done.
Okay. The kidnapped girls, the Chibok girls, we have been to see a ray of hope. What comments do you have on that?
You know, this is one case which has excited interest from across the globe, including in Australia. There's whenever there's good news about the Chibok girls, it resonates very strongly at home in my country. It is the saddest of sad stories, and it's very hard to even find the right language to describe the tragedy involved and to express our deep horror at the experience that these girls have suffered, and they should never have been taken in the first place, and they should be released immediately. And so we stand very, very strongly and firmly with Nigeria and with the entire international community, I think I can say, in calling for their immediate release. Okay.
You will agree with me that a US election is a world election, is it true?
I think it's undeniable that what happens in United States politics because of
affects the entire world, right?
It does.
So what are your comments with the recent developments in the US?
The Australian Prime Minister has already telephoned Mr. Trump to offer his congratulations to the new administration. He's also phoned Mrs. Clinton to congratulate her on a very hard-fought campaign. Look, there's no doubt that the United States is a country of enormous influence on the global scene. Australia enjoys very, very strong relationships with the United States over many, many decades. It's our second largest trading partner, our largest source of foreign direct investment. So we have obviously a strong interest in continuing our good relations, but above all we have supreme confidence that will continue.
Okay.
In fact, the relationship between the United States and Australia transcends politics. It is much deeper.
Before we go, you met Nigeria-Australian relations somewhere, and you desire to take it somewhere before you leave, because you will not be in this mission for a very, very long time. It's a tenured assignment, right? So where will you want to leave it?
I would like to, my job and my aim here is to make sure that Australians know more about Nigeria and Nigerians know more about Australia. It's all about enriching the fabric of our bilateral relationship, which is already stronger and deeper than most people realise. So that's my goal, and I'm happy to be here to work with my Nigerian friends to bring that about.
So were you happy talking with us on NTA International?
It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Paul Lemon, Your Excellency, thanks for being on Diplomatic Ties. And it was half sharing your thoughts, and we hope and desire that the drive you give to the relations between Nigeria and Australia really gets a fresh breath and goes higher and higher heights. Thanks for coming on Diplomatic Ties.
You're very welcome.
That's about that on the program today, and my guest, as I said earlier, is the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria, His Excellency Paul Lemon. We talked about Australian relations with Nigeria and hinged on the educational policy, and we got to know a lot of other things Australia is doing with Nigeria. Mind you, Australia and Nigeria share a common genealogy or parentage in terms of who colonized them, like the UK. They are both members of the Commonwealth of Nations. And His Excellency says our relationship is a win-win, not a win-lose. And he hopes and believes that we can leverage on this to take our nations economically, culturally higher than this. Thanks for watching, and on behalf of all of us, we hope you do it again in a very interesting edition of Diplomatic Ties. Bye-bye.